Ernie pizza is a favorite food for so many. I know myself included, and lots of toppings. And I love anchovies. But when I tell members of my family about anchovies, you should see the look on their
Oh,
face.
yeah, I know. I love anchovies too. We're really alike, you
We
know.
are kindred spirits there. Now, what is licorice pizza?
Yeah, it doesn't sound very good, does it? I mean, I don't think
Mm.
I'd like licorice on my pizza. I'm Italian, but I like a lot of pizzas. And my Auntie Anne used to make the best pizza in the world. It was a little bit thick, and she did an anchovy, a slight anchovy thing on it. Oh my God. Every time the family got together, we would wait for Auntie Anne's pizza to get there. She'd make piles of it. And I had a big family. I mean, in San Jose, we were probably about 200 people, all kind of related, brothers and sisters and cousins and first cousins and second cousins. And it was a big migration into San Jose by a lot of nationalities because there was a lot of construction going on. It was a fast growing city. And then when Silicon Valley hit, it was like the fastest growing city in the country. So, but then it also, it's like a cursing and a blessing. I mean, it's a curse and a blessing. It was great when it all happened, and then Silicon Valley started moving away, and it was like this ghost town. I remember a few years back going through Silicon Valley when I was up north with my cousins, and it was like a ghost town. It was like that Chinese city where you see all those buildings and there's nobody in them. It was like that. It was very strange, but now I guess a lot of it's coming back. A lot of it moved away because of California and all the admissions and taxes and all that craziness that's going on here. But it was a great place to grow up. And coming back to San Jose, coming back to Northern California from New York, I never really wanted to come back to California. I got there, and the first day I was there in Manhattan, I was a New Yorker. I felt right at home. I was like a fish back in water. It was great and amazing, and I jumped on. It was like saddling a bucking bronco and just hanging on, and that's what it was like. It was like that, and when we came back out to open up an office for the guy we were working for, we moved into the cross. Well, first we started Pacific Pioneer in 1972, January 1st, and it was a little one-bedroom house. It was a cottage kind of thing up on a hill in the Hollywood Hills above and over to the left of Capitol Records. And so, my partner had rented that while we were still working for the other guy because my wife, Bonnie, moved down to Southern California with us. So now it was the three of us, and we were living in the apartment that Craig had rented for us. Tony moved out and got this one bedroom cabin. It was beautiful. So we moved in with him when we left the company we were working for, and we started Pacific Pioneer. We moved in there, and we talked about that in the past and other things that we had. It was a little tiny place. And then the first move we moved down to the crossroads of the world, which was down on Sunset. And we had the first place we had there, and this was probably 1973, toward the end of 73. We moved in, and we had Mel Blanc, the voice guy with Bugs Bunny on them. We rented his first recording studio. It was his first recording studio in the Crossroads of the World. Crossroads of the World was this cool little place on Sunset between Highland and Wilcox that was all these little, it was like a movie set. It was all these little beautiful little offices, and it was like a Hollywood set. And we had rented Mel Blanc's first studio. Then we moved into what was it was like a pagoda-shaped building. It looked like it was from India, and it became the background for the photo shoot of Muscle of Love for Alice Cooper. It was a mud wrestling place that we sort of converted, and that's where we were. Well, when we moved into that place, right to the left of us was a company called Haji Sound. And Haji Sound was a mobile recording studio. They had started, this guy, John and his buddies, and Jim Messina from Loggins and Messina was involved with them. And it was like one of the first real beautiful, tricked out mobile recording studios. And they kind of were across from us. And needless to say, we ended up meeting Jim Messina. We hit it off really well, and John and the guys from Haji Sound. And one day, this guy walks into Pacific Pioneer, and nobody really knew him. He introduced himself. His name was Jim, and he was a fan. He knew the guys over at Haji Sound, and they were taught. They had mentioned that Pacific Ioneer is right there because we didn't really have an outdoor sign. It was just this pagoda-shaped window, and we didn't have a logo on the door or anything. But people who needed to know us, we were there. And Lieber Krebs was there, the management company, the guys that managed Poco in America, John Hartman. They were all in the front part of the Crossroads of the World. It looked like a big ferry boat. And then the front part of it looked like a ferry boat, and there were all these offices and round windows. It looked like it was something that should be in the water. And then down along both sides were all these cool little offices and beautiful little buildings and stuff. And one of my fondest memories of that was there was a barber who had to probably be about 300 years old, and he had one customer that came every week. It was Ricky Nelson's dad, Ozzie Nelson. And Harriet used to drive him there in their Mercedes, and she'd let him out, and he'd go in there and get his haircut every week. And I think this is the only customer that guy had. And Harriet would wait in the car for him. And we were we could see her. It was so amazing. And one time I went out and I introduced myself to her, and she was very, very sweet. But that was his barber, and it had always been his barber. So the Crossroads of the World had a real, art kind of thing that was going on. Alive, I think, even had an office there for a little bit. They had an extension office there with Shep and them. But we moved in, and it was great. And these guys at Haji were actually building this recording studio in this big van, this big diesel trailer. And one day this guy walks in, his name was Jim, and he had said that, the guys at Haji had said that Pacific Ioneer was over there, and he had heard of us. He kind of knew the work and asked if, he could see around. And we walked him through the art department. In Pacific Ioneer, we always put up printed pieces. Once we had like an album cover or a sheet from the printing press, because we go on the press checks, we would put it up on the wall. So all the walls in the art department were like covered with all these different album covers and overlapping. It was a piece of art in itself. It was our wallpaper. And then we painted the floor silver. So it was like the silver floor. It was crazy. And Jim really loved it. And, it was very cordial. And he left. And it was like, oh, okay, the guys at Haji recommended us. And a couple days later, he comes back. And he brings his wife, his girlfriend at the time, later became his wife, with him. And he asked if she could see some of this stuff we were doing. And we showed her around. And then we went into Tony's office. My partner had the office. And it turned out his name was Jim Greenwood. And Jim Greenwood was the owner of Licorice Pizza Records. And up until that time, their logo was this lettering, Licorice Pizza, and it had a record at the top of the lettering. And it was kind of boring, and it didn't really have a feel to it. It didn't have an emotional connection to it. Like, he really liked the stuff that we did, how we got involved with the groups, understood them. We weren't just another design company. We really were fans. And he was a fan, and he knew all the stuff that we had done. And we're talking the mid-'75. So we already had a lot of heavy duty stuff to our credit. A lot of big bands, a lot of current bands, Alice Cooper, Aerosmith, all these Black Sabbath, all these bands that were selling records in his stores. At that point, he had 2 stores, one in the Valley and one over at the end of Sunset. And I think before it was Licorice Pizza, it was Tower Records. And that was a chain. They were in San Francisco. And in fact, I went to college with a kid that did all their graphics and flyers and stuff. And so they were there. And then they closed that one, and it became a Licorice Pizza. And then later on, and I've got some comps, and that's another discussion, but he opened up a store a couple blocks away from Licorice Pizza for his wife. It was called Oz. It was like a novelty store that sold unique kinds of things, kind of like Tesoro's in Beverly Hills, but only more affordable than that. But and so we worked on some logo stuff for him. But back to the Licorice Pizza logo. So he said, I have this lettering, and it's okay. And I just have a record, but I think that my company needs to be more than that. It needs to have a timelessness to it. Okay. And he hit the nail right on the head, because the stuff that we designed, the stuff that I created, that we designed, was time. I like to think a lot of it is timeless. It's like looking at an old movie and you can relate to it today. It makes you cry, it makes you laugh. There's a connection that you have, even though it was done in the 30s or 40s. Most people weren't even born, but you still have that emotional connection to it. And I like to think that what we did at Pacific Pioneer had that same kind of power to the consumer. And so we talked about it. And for me, you know, nostalgia was always a big thing. And lettering, you know, I was trying to change the lettering because the lettering was kind of, but that's okay. And as you see over here, that's a rough sketch, a rough comp, a color comp that I did of some lettering that I ended up, he didn't buy it, but I ended up using it later on for Pacific Pioneer on the side of our truck. You know, we had that van, that green and black van, and I had that lettering painted, only it said Pacific Pioneer, but I used that same lettering because, you know, I even though I'm a lettering guy, if I got something that I like, I'm going to keep with it. And then, you know, I decided that we needed to have an image, and I was a big fan of old magazines, looking through the magazines from the 20s and 30s, even before they had photography where they would use illustration, and a lot of simple colors, a lot of tango orange and olive green, and, you know, it just had a real feeling, an emotional feeling to it. And everyone loves nostalgia. You know, everybody loves nostalgia, and it doesn't matter when it was done, you just love it. And I once heard an interview with Ted Turner, and the interviewer asked him, you know, you've made it and lost it, made it and lost it, and you're very successful. What would you say was the smartest thing that you ever did? And he, without any equivocation, he just immediately said, starting Turner Movie Classics and buying all those old movies that nobody really thought were worth anything. And he said, because everyone loves nostalgia. Mm-hmm. And he's right. I mean, there's something about nostalgia. When you feel it, you feel comfortable, you feel warm, you feel good. It makes you feel good. So I did this sketch over here that I'm going to send you the art on this so that you'll have it. You can make it bigger. But that's the sketch that I did. I wanted to do like Licorice Pizza, only making it a record, a hot pizza steaming with the smoke coming off, and and there's mom making it in the kitchen, homemade pizza, licorice pizza. It just had this, the image had this amazing kind of nostalgic feel to it, and the colors, the blue and the orange and all those things, and the smoke coming off the record. And Jim loved it. That was the sketch that I did that we showed him. Then Carl Ramsey, who was our airbrush illustrator at Pacific Pioneer, did his version of my sketch, where you see she's younger because Jim wanted to make her younger, and the smoke goes into music notes and stuff off the record. So it became a more contemporary version of something nostalgic, and it just really struck a verb with a lot of people, including Jim, and he loved it. And we were really. We were really happy to work with him. We worked on a few other things, like I said, Oz. We didn't get that project, but we got some beautiful comps that Drew did, and I did lettering for, and I've got those. And those are things that we're eventually going to share and talk about. There's a million things, Joyce, like we talked about. Joyce and I every week talk about what we're going to do the next week, and the one thing that we never have to worry about, Joyce, is that there's thousands of stories.
Never run out of ideas. You have quite a history. And then the thing is, we keep learning from each other, and our friends on the block are learning as well, too.
Yeah, I get a lot of response. That Flo and Eddie, the over 500 views on just my posting. That doesn't include yours. Yours is a whole separate thing. But when I post on Facebook, one that I do on one of my pages is over 500 views. People are liking it. And we talked about, I sent you a list of the stars. I had forgotten all about the enormity of people that were there, and there were still more after that. We had to finish it so that it could go get printed and go into the bowling alleys, because it was a floor standing thing, and there were also posters. And there was probably another 20 people that were added after, because Mark and Howard, Flo and Eddie just kept doing it. I mean, those guys. We should definitely do another piece of that. You suggested, I think
Yes.
it's a great one, and there's plenty of stories, and I've got plenty of photography of the different rock stars and celebrities with the teams that they bowled with. We've got a lot of stuff, a lot of content on that.
Oh, that is exciting. I was even getting crazy. I was going on the net and I found on David Cassidy, a page
Yes.
that is devoted to David, pictures of him and Kay Lenz at the bowling alley. And they talked about the rock and bowl.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I had forgotten a lot of the band. I forgot the Doobie Brothers were there. I mean, and the Doobie Brothers, I mean, Toulouse Street was huge, and, they were really, we got to meet Jeff Baxter, and, I forget, there were two guys from Doobie Brothers. And all of REO Speedwagon was there in Kansas. I mean, all these bands were just coming up, and it was just, and Mark and Howard, because they had the celebrity, they had the respect. They were older rock people, successful, but the young, usually younger people go, nah, you old people, you don't know what you're talking about, but it wasn't like, it's not like that with musicians. It's not like that with artists. Although there is a certain competitiveness that's wired into all of us, there's still a camaraderie and a respect that you have. Like, I have my idols, designers like Saul Bass and Milton Glaser and people from, Pushpin Studios in New York, and just all these amazing, AC Lehman from RCA Records, who was like amazing. And I got a chance to work with him on a couple of Jefferson Airplane things, Grand Funk. And, it's really, there is a lot of really great camaraderie between Howard and Mark and the younger stars. They really look to them and really look for guidance, look for help, got their opinions. It was really pretty amazing to watch all that happen. I don't know, so I would imagine it's still the same way today, although, I haven't been back involved in it for quite a while. I'm fine with that. I had my time in the sun with the music business, but yet, I was working on with Burton on a new album, on a new poetry book. So, who knows what's going to come out of left field. I'm hoping that I get the next Alice Cooper album.
Oh, I hope you do too, because I just love the designs that you've done in the past. And, and I am looking at this licorice pizza and I'm getting, because nostalgia brings a bit of comfort. And I'm, I'm looking at the older image, the image of the older lady. And I'm beginning to think about, like my grandmother and my mom, because I'm Italian as well too. And music is a comfort. So it's combining those feelings. Your illustrations, your designs, and Drew's illustrations really evoke a lot of feeling.
Yeah. Well, Drew, I always said Drew was able to breathe life into something two-dimensional, and make it feel alive. Those illustrations he did of Harrison Ford for Raiders of the Lost Ark, I mean, they look better than Harrison Ford. They look more real than him. I mean, Drew had that uncanny, and again, it was amazing. It was like what it was like? It was like being a Beatle. It was like being a Beatle. All of a sudden, the right guys came together, and each one of us had been doing our own things separately. Okay, I was in New York. I came out here. I didn't know any of those guys. Drew had got out of college and was making the rounds, and Bill Garland got out of the Air Force, and Carl Ramsey, I'd never known Carl, but I met him through some other artists, Bill Franks and people like that, and we all just kind of came together at Pacific Ioneer, and it was like, oh my God. And there was that no fear factor.
That's important.
The more incredible the project, the better we liked it. And when we look back, and we're going to be talking about some of these corporate pieces as well as the music pieces and how all that tied in too, because that was really, it was unknown. We were known for the music covers and stuff that we did, but the stuff that we did in corporate America was just as crazy. It was just as crazy and just as effective. When I worked at Nestle for 30 years, I worked at Nestle on a lot of their brands, 5 of their 6 divisions, stuff that you buy and I actually worked on, but the only problem with corporate America like that is that it's not as free and open as music. And it's like running to the ocean with a bucket of water and throwing it in and going, that's my water there, and then it dissipates and goes into a much bigger thing. And, it was just too much. I love it, but you know, it's a blessing and a curse. You know, you get more money, but you don't get the recognition. You know, you look at something that you poured your heart into, and you could recognize one or two things about it that was still your contribution. You know, and it becomes frustrating after a while. It
Yeah.
really does. You know, but we were always able to weather that because we were into the music. We were doing, at one point, I was just looking at our job. I told you that my partner kept a job log, and it's
Yes.
got every
Yes.
job we
Smart.
did. I mean, it's thousands of projects. And every project we did had it had that love that we put into it. I told you, it was like when I do something, it's like making love. I make love to that piece, and I pour my heart into it. And you know, the music business was great for that because we were talking to crazy people. They're musicians and they're crazy and they're creative. There's nothing not creative about a musician, okay? I don't care what band it was, they're all artists. And there was this connection. In corporate America, it's a little bit different. You get people that the head of marketing is the head of marketing because there was nobody else around to make the head of marketing, and he had been there the longest, so they give him the job, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, and he doesn't like that color because his wife doesn't like it, and his wife had 2 semesters of art at a community college, so we have to definitely make sure that we pay attention to that. So you know, really have to
Yeah.
bite your tongue a lot,
I
you
can
know. But not
understand.
all of corporate America was like that. That's why we tended to get younger clients. Our first real major account at Pacific Pioneer was Alltech Lansing. You know, easy connection because it's sound and it's music, and it's, you know, the first time people heard music or heard sound on a film, Al Jolson, was through an Alltech speaker. Alltech speakers were the voice of the theater, and it was every theater had Alltech speakers in it. And that's when they were the first ones. The Jazz Singer, I think, was the first movie, and it was through Alltech speakers. We had Alltech for about 3 years. It was a great client. We did as amazing work for Alltech Lansing as we did in the music business. But the connection was there because the guy who brought us in there was one of the first roadies for the Stones when they were on their first tour in the United States, a guy named Rich Mandela. And we met him through Black Oak, Arkansas, who was doing an endorsement for a kickbox company for guitar players. And Rich was the liaison between the company and the bands. And they were doing a Black Oak, Arkansas endorsement. And they said, okay, yeah, we'll do it, but Pacific Pioneer, our agency, has to do it. So that's how we met Rich. It turns out he was one of the first roadies in their first tour here, and he knew them all. And he introduced me to Chooch. And, you know, I mean, it was a crazy time, you know. And, you know, the Licorice Pizza thing really had a lot to do with that at that time. Because if you wanted music, that's where you went. There was no internet to buy it.
No.
Okay? You had to go to a record store. That's the only place you could get albums. And they were $3.89 for a vinyl.
Oh, I miss those days.
Yeah,
Oh, now
remember
I'm
the
getting
sticker? Had the
nostalgic.
sticker on the shrink wrap, $3.59 or something. You know, but you know, it's an amazing time, and I'm glad we're having an opportunity to talk about it. And I hope, you know, that our neighbors on the block here who are wonderful, I hope they just keep tuning in. And you know, like I said, I'm always around. I'm always on the block watching the corners, make sure nothing goes on and that we don't know about. And then for music.
Oh, I've been thinking, what is he gonna pick?
Okay. Well, because it's so weird. Because I was able to meet Jim Messina, and he was just really a great guy. I never met Kenny Loggins, but Jim Messina was awesome. He was a partner in Haji, and for that, I'd like to play House on Pooh Corner.
Oh, Ernie, I would not have even guessed that. That is great.
And part of the reason that is so important for me is when Bonnie and I first started living together, we were into Winnie the Pooh books. So every night before we went to sleep, we would read a few pages out of Winnie the Pooh, one of his adventures. So it became a very emotional thing for her and I. And when House at Pooh Corner came out with Loggins and Messina, it was just, that became, along with I Got You Babe by Sonny and Cher, that's our second song. So House at Pooh Corner, that would be what I would.
You made excellent choices. And then I'm going to get everybody revved up for the Licorice Pizza for our chat. I'm going to play Norm Fox and the Rob Roy's Pizza Pie.
All right. All right. All right.
Boy, together we really come up with some good ones, don't
Well,
we?
and you could also throw in Dean Martin's When the Moon Hits Your Eye Like a Big Pizza Pie.
We played Dean on the Block Party. The Block Party neighbors love him.
Yeah, well, you might want to play that one too.
All these great ideas. Ernie, thank you so much. We really do it. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation about Licorice
Joyce,
Pizza.
I couldn't do it without you. And
Same
I really
here.
appreciate you having heart for what we're doing. And I feel that our neighbors are coming around to it. I mean, I'm getting more and more responses. I'm getting more and more views when I post it. And it's just great. For me, it's like, if I can tell you the story, then the story will never die, because that person, you'll tell to other people, and it exponentially just grows. And, it's, for me, it's great. It's how I can stay alive forever.